Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and welcome back to Sentinel Reviews. Today, we are beginning our look into the celebrations of Doctor Who's 60th anniversary. While the TV specials themselves aren't happening until November, we are going to begin by looking at Big Finish's celebration of the 60th anniversary, the multi-part epic Doctor Who Once in Future. Today we are looking at its first story, Past Lives, released in May 2023, written by Robert Valentine, directed by Helen Goldwyn. Past Lives stars Tom Baker as the Fourth Doctor, Sadie Miller as Sarah Jane Smith, Gemma Redgrave as Kate Stewart, Ingrid Oliver as Petronella Osgood, and Rufus Hound as the Meddling Monk. Now, always, because I do these unscripted, there is a blanket spoiler warning in place, just in case I decide to start talking about spoilers. If you do not wish to be spoiled, then in the description box below is the link to Big Finish's website where you can purchase Doctor Who Once in Future Past Lives, either the standard or special edition. And I'm going to open with my thoughts. Past Lives is an okay story. It is very entertaining. There's a lot of entertainment value to it, but structurally, it's kind of sloppy. Also, I can't help but feel I was expecting something different. So the way the story is structured is we have our opening, which is setting up what the sort of central conflict of Past Lives is. And then skipping ahead to the ending, we kind of have the lead in into the next story. But in the middle of that is this entirely self-contained adventure. And I have to admit, I am kind of disappointed in that. Given that this is a multi-part epic, I would have liked a little more cohesion. Now, credit where it's due. This is only the first story, and we're only getting one story a month, so we need to see what is happening with the other stories before we see if this is going to be how they're structured, if this is a constant, or if we are going to end up getting something a little more cohesive. But if it does end up being a bunch of one-offs that are only linked at the beginning or the end of each story, that is going to be really disappointed. And as I said earlier, this is kind of sloppy because it's very clear that Robert Valentine needed more than an hour to tell this story. Like, if nothing else, because he is trying to juggle 5 leads, and they don't all get that much to do. I remember Kate and Sarah in particular being really underserved. So, now let's get into the story itself. We have a really intriguing opening premise. So, we open in the Time War, and we see a couple of Time Lord medics find the Doctor, and it seems the Doctor has been hit by what's only being called a degeneration weapon, and he starts regenerating backwards, so to speak. Now, one thing interesting to note here is that the first degeneration we get is into the 7th Doctor, which, again, just interesting to note, means that whatever happened to the 8th Doctor. Now, this is going to be interesting for a few reasons, because we know that, at the very least, Christopher Eccleston, Jonathan Carley, and David Tennant are in Once in Future. So, given that this is happening to the 8th Doctor, it'll be interesting to see how the future incarnations play into this story. Anyway, the Doctor wanders through the battlefield trying to get to the TARDIS as he continues regenerating backwards, and we get several cameos from Sylvester McCoy, Colin Baker, Peter Davison, Stephen Noonan, Tim Treloar, and Michael Troughton before the Doctor is able to stabilize himself into Tom Baker. Now, I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of where I want to go with this. Let me finish the summary here. And the Doctor kind of realizes that, or believes that, at the moment this weapon was used on him, the monk was there. So he sets off to find the monk. Now, I'll get into performances a little bit. The performances are the shining part of this story. They are all great. Like I said, Kate Stewart and Sarah Jane Smith don't get a lot to do, but Gemma Redgrave and Sadie Miller do get to shine through their performances. Ingrid Oliver and Tom Baker are great, so is Rufus Hound. I would say the standout performances of this story for me our Sadie Miller as Sarah Jane Smith, she gets a lot of pathos in this story because for her role in it, takes place right after the Hand of Fear. So the Doctor has just dropped her off. Literally, her first scene is the end of the Hand of Fear, talking to the dog, and then the monk kidnaps her. And Rufus Hound, and she gets a lot of pathos. Like, she gets to meet the Doctor again, and there's this whole point of that, even though it's been hours since they parted ways for her, it has been essentially centuries for him. And Sadie Miller and Tom Baker just play it off really well, and you almost get this feeling that both Sadie and Tom are, in a way, talking about Liz. Rufus Hound is just having the time of his life as the monk. Rufus Hound is not one of my favorite incarnations. At this point, I feel he is becoming overused. Like, if you have a monk story, more often than not, in Big Finish at any rate, it's gonna be Rufus Hound, which is kind of a shame because they have two other monks, they have Graham Garden and Gemma Whelan. And I would just like to see them used more often. Granted, I think it might be a matter of availability. Rufus Hound is probably the one available most of the time, but it's always Rufus Hound. I would just like to see some variety. Granted, that Hound's madcap, sort of opportunistic portrayal of the monk really works in this story. And the banter between him and Tom Baker is great. Like, as the Doctor is tracking the monk down, and the monk wonders how he keeps finding him, the Doctor responds, "Oh, I always have a trick or three up my sleeve." And later, the monk manages to get the drop on the Doctor and knock him out. And as he's fleeing, the monk responds, "You're not the only one with tricks, Doctor." Or sleeves. It just, the dialogue, and again, the performances and the dialogue are really the shining star of this story. One of my other favorite moments, just as an example of how good the dialogue is an early interaction between Kate Stewart and Osgood when, they're tracking some sort of phenomenon that has shown up on their scans, and, Kate's trying to get information on it, and it's like, how big is it? It's roughly the size of Glastonbury. Town or festival? Town. That's specific. Where is it? About 10,000 miles above Glastonbury. I see. It's those little moments of banter that really make this story come to life. So now let's talk about Tom Baker. Sorry, I'm trying to keep track of where I want to go and what I want to talk about here. Tom Baker gets to do some really interesting things with this. He has his usual zeal and energy in the role, but it's very interesting to note because, as I mentioned, this story opens with the Doctor getting hit by a degeneration weapon. So in a way, Tom is not playing the Fourth Doctor. He's playing the Eighth Doctor, which is also which is also really interesting because this is something Paul McGann has done in the past. At least on two separate occasions, Paul has done audios for Big Finish where, they were essentially Fourth Doctor audios that were rewritten for him. So, like The Stones of Venice and Shada in particular. I'm sure there are other instances, but those are the two I know for certain. And it really shows how similar in demeanor and attitude the Fourth and Eighth Doctors are. So to kind of see this reverse is really interesting because given that this is the Time War Eighth Doctor, we're also seeing sides of the Doctor that we don't usually see with Tom Baker, or sides he doesn't usually play. Like in the climax, when they're on the alien ship, the alien thread of this story, he keeps saying, "I'm here to rescue the monk. We're not here to stop the aliens." And there's a reason for that, because, essentially what the MacGuffin the aliens came to get, and them activating it is ultimately what destroys them. But it's interesting because the Fourth Doctor usually has a friendlier approach. He usually tells them what his plan is before it comes into action. And just the way the Fourth Doctor treats Kate, Sarah, and Osgood, as he says, "We're not going to stop the Hyreth," the name of the aliens in this story. "I'm just here to rescue the monk." It's very callous. It's very out of character for the Fourth Doctor. I originally I was originally going to chalk that up as a weakness of the script, but then it kind of clicked that it's like, oh, degeneration weapon, Tom is playing the Eighth Doctor. So that weakness kind of became a strength because, again, Tom is playing essentially a different Doctor. And let's see, was there anything else I wanted to say about that? Just a small thing. Also, I love the Fourth Doctor and Osgood. They have a really fun dynamic together. I like Osgood. Okay, I kind of have issues with her as sort of being the fan/audience proxy into the show because Moffat did it very ham-fistedly to the. I don't want to say she was insufferable in the show. She wasn't, but it's just the way Moffat portrayed her, and in turn, the way Moffat portrayed Doctor Who fans isn't very flattering. And it's something that, while the audios have toned down, Big Finish still kind of portrays Osgood in that sense. Like very famously on TV, she wore the Fourth Doctor's scarf, and now in the audios, like on the covers and stuff, she wears the Third Doctor's smoking jacket, or she has celery on her lapel, and it's something thankfully it is toned down to the point, and Osgood as a character herself really gets to shine in Big Finish, but it's very frustrating that, Osgood is essentially playing a caricature of Doctor Who fans. But that's me getting away from the point. Again, her and Tom Baker are great. Like there's a scene where they're all going to the alien ship and she's all excited. It's like, I'm sorry, I've never gotten to fly the TARDIS. And Tom very excitedly to her goes, oh, then I have some good news for you. In about 15 seconds, you're going to crash it as well. And it just goes to show more and more that really the dialogue and the performances are the strength of this story. So, that reminds me too, I almost forgot about this. So back to my earlier critique that this is a self-contained story with the larger scope of this epic just being the front and the end of the story. This does seem to imply, at the very least, as far as the larger plot, the Doctor trying to figure out where this degeneration weapon came from and what it's doing to him, who used it and such, the dialogue does seem to imply that in the larger scope of this epic, the monk will be back, because the monk makes it very clear that he doesn't know what happened to the Doctor, and suggests that whatever did happen will likely happen in the monk's future. So I think it's safe to assume that the monk will be back in a later story. But that's where we end. The situation with the Hyrith gets resolved. The Hyrith are surprisingly, speaking of the Hyrith, the aliens in this story are surprisingly well done. There's a lot of pathos for them that, you wouldn't think you'd get from a Doctor Who story, especially from a Tom Baker story. They are alien anthropomorphized crocodiles, and there's this off-screen adventure that the Fourth Doctor and Sarah had stopping them, and essentially now the Hyrith are trying to correct that adventure and come back in full swing. And I don't want to spoil what happens there, but like I said, the performances from, I am blanking on the actor's name, I'm sorry, but the performance from the lead Hyrith whose name is Gallivant, I believe, is really good, especially when we get to the end where he just basically breaks down and says, I'm so tired. It's really good, and it just further goes to show my frustration with the story and my theory that Robert Valentine did not want to write an hour story. He really wanted this to be longer. And this story ends with our lead-in into the next story. The monk suggests that to try and stabilize the Doctor's degeneration, he could use sympathetic DNA. And then he suggests finding his daughter. And the Doctor leaves to do so just as he begins regenerating. As I said, Once in Future Past Lives is sloppy. It's got a lot going on in such a short amount of time. It's trying to juggle way too much, opening what this epic is about, this self-contained story, juggling 5 leads, and, being a self-contained story while being a part of a greater arc. And it leads to several moments feeling rushed, but thankfully the performances and the banter and dialogue really help make up for its shortcomings. But that's all I have to say about Past Lives. What were your thoughts? Have you heard it yet? Please start a conversation in the comments below. And remember to like, comment, subscribe, click the bell next to subscribe to get notifications when I upload, share the video around, all of it helps my channel grow, and join me next month where we'll be picking up where this story left off. The Doctor has regenerated into his 5th incarnation and is looking for his daughter. Peter Davison and Georgia Moffat star together once again in The Artist at the End of Time. This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and I'll see you guys next time.